GLM 5.2 costs 4 times less than Claude Opus 4.8 per trace, and the retrieval gap between them is only 4 percentage points. That's the number, and it changes the whole conversation about which model you should actually be paying for. Both models just dropped and people are already picking sides without real data. So I ran GLM 5.2 versus Claude Opus 4.8 across 5 real tests, pulling from verified sources like Brain Trust evals and official pricing docs. No vendor spin, no cherry-picked benchmarks. And honestly, the results surprised me because the cheaper model doesn't just come close on long context retrieval, it's within a few percentage points, and that gap has some pretty serious implications for what you should actually spend your API budget on. Alright, so who is this actually for? If you're running long document pipelines, building Chinese language apps, or just watching your API bill climb every month, this comparison is going to matter to you because picking the wrong model here is a real cost decision that compounds fast at scale. Test 1. Multilingual reasoning and translation. You're shipping a product to Chinese users and your model starts hallucinating in the wrong language. Or worse, it drops context mid-translation and you don't catch it until a customer does. And that's the failure mode we're stress testing here. What I found here was honestly kind of frustrating. Neither GLM 5.2 nor Claude Opus 4.8 has published multilingual benchmarks. GLM explicitly supports Chinese and English, and Opus gets recommended for translation by a service called Transfer, but there are no actual scores on screen to compare. It's all anecdotal. Take this one with a grain of salt because the gap here could be real or it could be nothing. GLM's native Chinese support is a structural thing, not a benchmark thing, and Opus's translation recommendation comes from one vendor, not an independent test, so the actual difference could be way smaller than the marketing suggests. So this one lands as a tie. I was expecting GLM's native Chinese support to give it a clear edge, but without verified scores for either model you can't call a winner, and the scoreboard sits at GLM 5.20, Claude Opus 4.80, one tied. No points awarded until someone actually publishes the data. Test 2. Long context document processing. You've got a 50,000 token contract or a massive codebase, and your model pulls the wrong clause or misses a dependency buried deep in the file. And that's not a minor annoyance. That's a bug that ships or a deal term you missed. Retrieval accuracy at this scale is a real problem. I pulled the Brain Trust eval data, and here's what we got. At 25,000 tokens, Claude Opus 4.8 hit 87.0% retrieval accuracy versus GLM 5.2 at 83.3%, and at 50,000 tokens, Opus held 87.9%, while GLM came in at 84.5%. On Frontier SWE coding, GLM trails Opus by just 1%, and these are the same test setup, so the comparison is clean. Claude Opus 4.8 takes this one. I was expecting a bigger gap given the price difference, but honestly 3 to 4 percentage points is it, and Opus wins because it's consistently more accurate on retrieval across both context lengths. Score is now GLM 5.20, Claude Opus 4.81 with one tied. Test 3. Real-time information and knowledge cutoff. Your model confidently answers a question about something that changed 6 months ago. You don't catch it, and it goes out to a user or into a report. Stale knowledge that sounds confident is way more dangerous than a model that just says it doesn't know. What surprised me here is that neither model actually has real-time access. Claude Opus 4.8 has a clean January 2026 cutoff, which is at least clear. But GLM 5.2's cutoff is a mess with conflicting reports saying either November 2025 or March 2026, so the on-screen cards show a known date for Opus and a question mark for GLM. Now, the nuance here is that neither model is going to save you if you need live data. No web search, no live feed for either one, so Opus's cleaner cutoff date is a transparency win, not a capability win. And if your workflow needs current information, you're going to need to build retrieval on top of both of these models anyway. This one's a tie. I was expecting Opus's clearer cutoff to pull ahead, but since neither model has real-time access, the practical difference is pretty much zero for most workflows, and the score is now GLM 5.20, Claude Opus 4.812 tied. GLM's ambiguous cutoff is a minor knock, but it doesn't change the outcome here. Test 4. API pricing and cost efficiency. You're running thousands of long document traces a day, and your API bill just doubled because you picked the wrong model, and that's not a hypothetical. That's the kind of thing that kills a product's unit economics before you even get to scale. Cost per trace is where this gets really real. Okay, So this is where I was genuinely shocked. At 25,000 tokens per trace, GLM 5.2 costs 0.0208 Taj versus Claude Opus 4.8 at 0.0856, which is 4.1 times cheaper per trace. Input tokens are 1.40 per million for GLM versus 5.00 for Opus, and output tokens are 4.40 versus 25.0 SARS, a 5.7 times gap, and these numbers are verified from Brain Trust and official pricing docs. GLM 5.2 wins this one, and it's not even close. I knew it'd be cheaper, but 5.7 times cheaper on output tokens was not what I expected, and GLM wins because the cost gap is massive and verified across multiple sources. Scoreboard now reads GLM 5.21, Claude Opus 4.81, 2 tied. Test 5, creative writing and roleplay consistency. Your model writes something that sounds flat, generic, or just off voice, and now your creative product feels like every other AI tool out there. Voice and taste are hard to quantify, but when a model gets it wrong, users feel it immediately and they stop coming back. What I found here is that there are no objective benchmarks for either model on creative writing. None. Claude Opus 4.8 has a testimonial from Anthropic's own staff writer saying, "It's trusted for voice and taste," but that's one person's opinion, not a score. And the on-screen cards show blank benchmark slots for both, which is honestly the most honest thing I can show you. And look, community sentiment does lean toward Claude Opus 4.8, feeling more natural for creative work, and I think that's probably real. But it's a subjective call and the gap could be use case specific. Writing technical documentation versus long-form fiction versus role-play dialogue. These models might flip depending on the task. Another tie. I was honestly expecting Opus to pull a clear win here, given its reputation. But without verified scores, you can't award the point, so the final scoreboard reads GLM 5.21, Claude Opus 4.81, 3 tied. Opus probably has a real creative edge in practice, but the data just isn't there to make it official. So here's where GLM 5.2 clearly beats Claude Opus 4.8. It's 4.1 times cheaper per trace at 0.02 versus 0.09. Output tokens are 5.7 times cheaper at 440 versus 25 points per million. And it has native Chinese language support, which is a structural advantage for Chinese workflows, and you get the same 1M context window and 128K output tokens at a fraction of the cost. And here's where Claude Opus 4.8 clearly beats GLM 5.2. It hits 87.9% retrieval accuracy at 50,000 tokens versus GLM's 84.5%, a consistent 3 to 4 percentage point lead across both context lengths. It's slightly ahead on Frontier SDW long horizon coding by 1%, and it has a genuine creative reputation, trusted for voice and taste by Anthropic's own writers. Honestly, I went in expecting Opus to dominate and GLM to just be the budget option you settle for. But what actually happened is GLM 5.2 is competitive enough that the cost difference becomes the whole argument. 4 times cheaper. That's the number. If you're price sensitive, running Chinese workflows, or scaling document pipelines, pick GLM 5.2, and if you need the best retrieval accuracy and polished creative output, and the bill doesn't scare you, Claude Opus 4.8 is worth it.